All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first Together We Can Community Forum. We're really happy that you've been able to join us tonight. We're quite excited to be introducing two of our very own staff members that are going to be teaching us more about trauma-informed care. We have Alex and Chelsea with us, and tonight they're going to be teaching us what trauma is, how trauma affects those recovering from addiction, and how you can provide the best care for them. We're going to uncover some of the clinical descriptions of what trauma is, as well as provide you with some information so you can recognize if someone is suffering from the effects of trauma in their life. Utilizing a trauma-informed approach does not necessarily require disclosure of trauma. Rather, services are provided in ways that recognize the need for physical and emotional safety, as well as choice and control in decision-making affecting a client's treatment. Tonight, Alex and Chelsea again are going to share and explore some personal examples from anonymous clients and hear what they have to say about how a trauma-informed approach has helped them heal and create safety in their life, and how that has actually transformed their quality of life and recovery journey. So we're very excited for that, and we would like to welcome everybody with us. And so without further ado, I am going to introduce, Alex is going to introduce himself, and we'll go from there.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction, Stephen. I personally am very excited to be able to not only be part of this, but be part of sharing my own personal journey, not only in recovery, but from addiction and trauma surviving times in my life. I work for Together We Can as an addictions counselor. I am also a member of the Canadian Addiction Counseling Certification Federation. Working in healthcare, as well as my own personal journey in recovery as a person in recovery, gives me a really, really unique and personal experience that I can share with everyone. And it also uniquely qualifies me to be able to talk with everyone here and share my experience. One thing to note is that I personally am not a trauma therapist. However, what we have compiled today is something that is not only evidence-based, but it is something that is personal to us. And hopefully you'll be able to give your own informed care after this webinar. Once again, this is about informed care through the lens of addiction and how you can not only help maybe yourself if you've experienced trauma from addiction, but also other loved ones that are in your life. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to one of my colleagues, Chelsea.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. So my name is Chelsea. I work with TWC. I'm at their main center right now, and I facilitate process groups, and I do one-on-one counseling with the clients there. I can tell you a little bit about me and my history. Years ago, when I entered the helping field, I worked as a 911 dispatcher, which then led me into working as a flight and ground paramedic. That was in Alberta. I did that for a few years until I injured my back, unfortunately, on the job. So after that happened, I came back to Vancouver. Vancouver is my home. I ended up working in the film industry for about 6 years, but I was really missing that element of being of service to others and supporting others in their own journey. Before it was based off of more the physical trauma. So I would be right in the mix of when things are happening to people as far as that type of trauma. But of course, there's the mental and emotional and spiritual trauma that comes with that as well. So now I'm in the capacity of working with clients. I'm with the CPCA, and yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm really excited about today. I love my work. I love my clients. I feel very grateful to be a part of TWC, and I'm excited to share this trauma-informed care webinar with you with Alex as my sidekick. So with that said, we're actually going to get started here. I'm going to screen share, so bear with me for 2 seconds. Okay, so welcome to the trauma-informed care module that we're doing today, and we're doing that through the lens of addiction. So today's webinar content, I'm going to go through what trauma is, what is a traumatic experience, signs of trauma, minimization and addiction, And then Alex is going to be going through the 6 guiding principles of trauma-informed care, trauma intervention, the window of tolerance, polyvagal theory, growth and support, trauma-informed language. So what can you do as a support system supporting somebody else in their trauma? And we have some resources at the end. So what is trauma? Sorry, I just need to move the camera for 2 seconds. Okay, trauma is the response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes one's sense of self and ability to feel a full range of emotions and experiences. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. Okay, significant distress or impairment in functioning that results from exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violation. So the concept of today's module and webinar, we're going to be talking about trauma through the lens of addiction. So although models to heal from trauma will be introduced during the webinar, please note that this series is intended to provide information so you can support individuals with a history of trauma and substance misuse with the understanding of trauma-informed care. It is not intended to be used as a trauma treatment plan. We will go through a model later on and the different phases, but as we're saying right now, it's not a treatment plan. So what is trauma? What is a traumatic experience? So any experience that causes emotional, physical, spiritual, physiological harm, either witnessed or personally experienced. So I do want to make that that point stand out, that it is witnessed or personally experienced. So we're going to go through a few of those. The first one is physical pain or injury. So that could look like a car accident, any serious injury to your body. Domestic abuse, so abuse within a household. That could be verbal, that could be emotional, that could be physical abuse. Addiction. So addiction can be traumatic, as a lot of you know. One thing I wanted to mention too is the trauma within active addiction. So I do have a lot of clients that they come in and they have these traumatic experiences that they want to kind of uncover or work through. I do find that a lot of clients, though, will tend to negate the trauma that's actually happened within their active addiction. A big reason for this is sometimes they feel, or I've heard them say, well, I feel like I deserved it because I was in my active addiction. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment that can be linked to that. So that being said, that's not the case. But, you know, I just want you all to realize that there's also a lot of trauma that happens within the active addiction. Witnessing a death, rape, and that goes for any type of sexual abuse. And it all depends, and it's always on a spectrum. So I know society will say, you know, rape, that's like one of the top forms of traumatic experience, but it really depends on the individual and the situation. A prison stay, any type of jail time, any altercations with law enforcement can definitely be traumatic for people. Overdose. And again, I want to note with overdose, that can be if you were to have overdosed yourself, or if you witnessed an overdose. So if you are somebody that has been supporting a loved one, or whether it's a client or a patient, it can be traumatic on either ends of it. So keep that in mind. Torture. Natural disasters. So natural disasters, I can speak to a colleague that I have that grew up in a village and they were struck with a tsunami. So of course there is the traumatic experience of actually going through that, but also the aftermath too. So it depends on what the trauma is, but with a natural disaster, I know his example was he was a young kid and walking down the road, he was seeing deceased bodies being piled up on top of one another and everything else that came after that. So always be aware that it can be during the instance or it can be things that follow as well. Parental abandonment. That is a big one that can be a traumatic experience. Another example that I can give you, I had a client once that he was speaking to the fact that he had his caregivers in his life and there wasn't one particular person that, you know, up and left. So he didn't feel abandoned in that way, but he did have issues later on in his life with different people and within relationships. And there were some different signs and symptoms of abandonment. So that being said, he had an experience where he was young, I don't know, he was kindergarten or preschool, and all the kids were playing outside of the school. All the parents came, picked up the kids, the teachers left, and he was left there. His mom forgot to pick him up at school that day. And we're going to talk about minimizing trauma as well. But for him, it was just like, poof, a light bulb went off for him. And he thought to himself, like, wow, okay, maybe that was traumatic. I always kind of brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. So we'll talk more about minimizing as we go. Death of a family member or someone close to you. Serious illness. With a serious illness, that can also be a hospitalization. I find another thing too is I've had clients in the past that have had medical issues that they had to deal with when they were children. So they were in the hospital a lot when they were young, and definitely that impacted their life moving forwards. Community violence, which can look like bullying, burglary, shooting, anything that's going on in the community that's negatively impacting you. System-induced trauma. So an example would be being removed from your home, adoption, growing up in foster housing. As far as system-induced trauma, another thing too can be within hospitalization. So people that struggle with substance misuse, I've heard a lot of the times they go into the hospital and, the nurse, the doctor finds out that they have issues with substances, and then they're treated completely different. So that stigma alone can be quite traumatizing to somebody. Any type of loss. And experience a pandemic, which we're all going through right now. But of course, there's a spectrum when it comes to that, right? It depends what's happened throughout the pandemic for you. A lot of people have lost loved ones. Another example that I can give would be for the elderly folk in the care homes, right? There was a period of time where they weren't allowed to see their loved ones. And so that isolation of being, locked in their room and maybe only seeing one support worker a day, that alone can be a traumatic experience for them. So moving on, I'm going to talk now about some signs an event may have been traumatic. So these are some signs or symptoms that you might feel. And, even right now, whether you're a support worker or maybe you think about things in your own life, maybe some things will pop up for you and you might think, oh, maybe that was traumatic for me. So we'll start with you were playing an event over and over. So that could be uncontrollable, intrusive thoughts. It could also be dreams as well. So that could happen any time of the day. If you feel like this thing just keeps coming back up for you, this experience, it might be useful to go and talk to somebody about it and find some support. Something feels just off about a past event. Maybe it was when you were younger. The one thing that I have to note with this though, is that being in the supporter role, we never want to come into anything with an agenda, as in, okay, well, let's try and figure this out. It definitely depends on the client and if they're willing to step into the exploration. So just keep in mind, it's not our goal to have an agenda to try and rehash traumatic things that it might not have even happened. So I just want to note that one. When an anniversary of the trauma completely derails your life. So that's a big one. Also called quote unquote traumaversaries. So if there was something that was traumatic that happened to you in the past, just like grief. So maybe someone died in your life and it's coming up to that day and that anniversary of their death. If you're not grounded and maybe you didn't think that it was a traumatic experience in the past, that can definitely, through the lens of addiction, lead to relapse. Also, if you're not engaged within the recovery community, if you don't have those support systems in place. When heavy emotions surface, a person may turn to misusing substances to numb the pain. So that kind of coincides with the one I was just talking about, because when misusing substances, a lot of the time, why? It's because somebody wants to suppress their emotions. They might be uncomfortable. They don't know how to deal with it. And so that's what they've been doing. So again, if it's somebody in recovery and they relapse, it could be due to some traumatic experiences that maybe they haven't explored before. Maybe they've never shared with somebody. That's a big piece too. Withdraw from healthy activities you once enjoyed. So I see this a lot, talking to clients, people could say, oh, when I was younger, I was the top of my football team. I love playing football. And maybe they continued that into their adulthood, but from whatever happened, whatever trauma happened in their past, maybe they get a little bit older and they start using substances, right, to numb those memories or just that pain or feeling that's coming up for them. So in the supporter role, that's one thing that you can do is definitely just, explore and talk with this person and say, oh, what did you like to do when you were young? That's something I'd love to do with my clients, is really explore, when you were young, what were things that interest you, just to kind of explore. Find it hard to socialize. So that would look like heightened anxiety, anger that's difficult to manage. I'll be giving an example later when Alex talks about the window of tolerance for that one. Continual mood swings. So a person being unable to stay within their window of tolerance. So unable to stay grounded. Their emotions, say with anger, they go from 0 to 100, they're all right 1 minute and then they just go straight to rage, or they become very hypervigilant. So mood swings is one, or it could go the other way as well too, when it goes into more of the isolation or dissociation. And loss of meaning of life, no sense of purpose. I feel like this comes up a lot with clients, definitely in the treatment setting as well. Everything that they knew before, they might have to completely reconstruct their friend group. They might have to change employment because it was a toxic environment. And so definitely there can be things tied to loss of meaning of life, no sense of purpose, if there are traumatic experiences that haven't been explored before. So moving on. And I apologize, sometimes I talk quickly, so I'll try and slow down a little bit. Why might someone minimize their traumas? So we're going to start with shame and embarrassment. So shame and embarrassment of comparing their trauma to someone else's that seems more significant. So this is something that comes up a lot in group. So doing process groups, I have a module that I use that talks about trauma-informed care, talks about minimizing traumas, what trauma is, and sometimes clients will share a story that they've experienced. Usually it's experiences that clients have shared before. I never want people to jump in there and start offering up things that they've never disclosed before. But that being said, with that happening, group has ended and I'll have an individual come up to me or want to book a session around something that's happened in their past. And they have this sense of shame or embarrassment because they're like, I think this experience was traumatic for me, but I didn't want to say anything because it's a little embarrassing because so-and-so's, well, that was traumatic. And so there's a lot of comparison that goes on. Denial. So the person might not want to believe what happened actually did. So again, if this is something that they've never disclosed before, if they feel like it will affect the way they function, or maybe it will affect relationships in their family, people might go into that denial mode. They might be like, oh, well, it wasn't that big of a deal, and just not really want to touch on it. Fear of others not believing them, being rejected or judged. So again, this fear can tie into that denial and shame and embarrassment. With the fear of people not believing them, they think, what, if I offer this up and then somebody doesn't believe me, well, then it's completely going to take away from my experience, or feeling as though they could be rejected from their family, their friend group, whatever that may be. And overwhelm. So not wanting to address the event because of the emotions that might surface. So I touched on this a little bit, especially within the recovery realm and the treatment realm. People and individuals, they come into treatment and of course, abstinence is key and they no longer have their substance of misuse. And prior to that, a lot of the time using that substance to numb those feelings, to not want to experience those feelings. So when we have clients that enter into treatment and they no longer have that substance that they used before to be able to cope, it can be scary. I've had a client before that came in and I said, how you doing? He said, I'm doing all right, but I think there's something wrong with me. And I said, well, what is that? He said, I was watching a commercial last night and I started crying. And I said, oh my gosh, there's nothing wrong with you. And I just had to explain, after suppressing emotions for so long, once that substance is no longer in your life, there's tons of emotions that are going to come up. So tying that back to trauma as well, if someone has never disclosed something before and they've never touched on it before, it can be scary. Or maybe they tried to share before and they were completely invalidated. And so they just wanted to stuff all that emotion down. So overwhelm is a big piece why people would minimize their trauma. The last one that I'm going to talk about is disenfranchisement and gaslighting. So with disenfranchisement, that would be having their trauma unacknowledged or feeling like it's socially unacceptable to talk about it. I could go into that a lot further, but we don't have a lot of time. And then with gaslighting, they could feel as though if they were to disclose their trauma or talk about it, they might be gaslight, which means someone can question their reality about what actually happened, or the person might say, well, that never happened, because maybe the other person is in denial about what happened. So Those are some reasons and some ways that people can minimize their traumas. Now we're going to shift it a little bit, and we're actually just going to talk about what is trauma-informed care. So trauma-informed care is defined as practices that promote a culture of safety, empowerment, and healing. It's aimed at ensuring environments and services are welcoming, engaging for clients and staff, with the assumption that everyone has experienced a trauma. So that's a really important piece, is no matter who it is, whether it's a client, whether it's a staff member, it's just having the understanding that even within society, that most everybody has experienced some form of trauma or traumatic experience. Trauma-informed care is brought forth with the assumption and knowledge of the impacts of trauma and how everyone has specific and personal needs. We'll get into this a little bit more as we go, but an example of personal needs, creating a safe environment. So say, for instance, if I have a client coming in for a one-on-one session, when they come in, I want to ask them, like, where do you want to sit? I'm not just going to sit and have them sit in this other chair. I'm going to say, where do you feel more comfortable? A lot of the time, people that have experienced traumatic incidences or experiences in their life, they want to sit close to a door, or maybe they want the door cracked open a little bit. So it's getting to know your clients and getting to know what allows them to feel safe. And trauma-informed care is here to provide a feeling of safety while empowering survivors to experience post-traumatic growth. So that is what we are aiming for when we are supporting somebody in their trauma. And now I am going to pass it over to Alex.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Chelsea. I'm really grateful that not only I get to go through a webinar series like this and go through it with a colleague that provides a lot of support and has talked a lot right now about the clinical supports and the clinical definitions of trauma-informed care. And I think the really unique part about going through something like this with someone is that we can talk together about how we're going to support someone. So now that we know a little bit more about what trauma is, why someone would minimize their trauma, we want to talk about how we can support them, how we can really give them the best chance and the best care possible if you're working in the industry as a healthcare professional. And then also, I think it's really important supporting a loved one, really informing yourself. The key part within this whole webinar is informed care. How do you support someone? All right, so before we go on to some of the things around supporting someone, I think it's important to talk about the guiding principles of care. So the first one that we have is safety. When you're providing care within clients, providing a safe space like Chelsea was talking about and providing them with a safe environment is key. So if you have a loved one that's at home and they have perhaps gone through some traumatic experience, or maybe you think that they have, providing a safe place for them, providing them consistency, providing them care in their home. Now, uniquely in addiction treatment, one of the key things that we want to do with our clients is making sure that they are safe, that their physical safety is in check, making sure that they feel safe in their room, make sure that we give them the opportunity to create a space that's inviting to them, etc. The next thing that we'll want to talk about is making sure that the connection that you have with that person is trustworthy and transparent. You're going to do what you say and you're going to say what you do. You're going to have congruent actions. If you say that you're going to be at a place at a certain time, make sure that you're there to help that person at a certain time. Trust is extremely important, and individuals that have gone through a traumatic experience have a very low trust threshold. Their window of tolerance is quite low. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but this is why building trust and being transparent with everything is important. Making sure that we have peer support and mutual self-help. So within Together We Can as an organization, a lot of the peers that we have here, not only the people that work here, but also the volunteers that work here, provide a peer support, people going through the same thing. And if I can plug Together We Can, together we can get through all of the things that we're going through. And Together We Can has a wonderful volunteer program, and that's one of the reasons why we have it, is because we want to provide peer support and mutual self-help from individuals who have all gone through the same thing. Collaboration and mutuality. This is really important. Giving voice and choice to a person, giving them the opportunity to collaborate in their treatment. If this is someone that's in treatment, letting them know, asking them permission, asking them what they would like to do, and giving them an ability to make a decision as well. And that goes on to the next one, which is empowerment, voice, and choice. So when somebody's gone through a traumatic experience, their window of tolerance has gone down dramatically. And we want to be able to help empower someone to make really good choices in their life. And that starts very, very small, with very, very small things. Chelsea mentioned one of them. When you're going into a session, you're asking them, where would you like to sit? Asking them permission, would you like to talk about X, Y, Z? So those are small little things, but they're guiding principles of care that really can help build trust when working with someone. And then the final one is making sure that you're being sensitive to cultural, historical, and gender issues. Really, really knowing and asking the person about their background, asking for permission, being culturally sensitive will be really, really important when working individuals in care. People come from all walks of life. So the more, again, education and information that you can get and take in yourself, you'll be able to provide informed care to the individuals or loved ones that you're working with. So now that we know a little bit more about guiding principles and we've talked a little bit more about clinical aspects, we want to go through how someone might heal from trauma. So that's in this webinar, we're going to go through the trauma intervention three-phase model. And the first stage in the three-phase model is creating safety and stabilization for the loved ones that you're with. This involves working towards an internal and external safety, understanding the impacts of trauma and self-care, discovery, sobriety, developing resources to help individuals regulate their emotions, improve self-esteem, and survivors will begin to make connections and manage their own symptoms. Now, it's important to note that when someone's going through a treatment experience or within addiction recovery, or if they're going through treatment from trauma from an experience outside, most individuals will go through, and the hope is to go through every one of these stages. These stages you can go through them within addiction recovery and treatment. You could go through all three stages, addressing the trauma from addiction. However, if somebody has a lot of adverse or early childhood experiences or some deeper rooted traumas, this may take longer. So it could take months or it could take years, and it's an ongoing process. So that's one thing to note. The next stage that we'll want to talk about is stage 2, and that's where someone would be going through their trauma processing. They're going to start to address the deeper impact of trauma. It's going to be a time for grief and mourning. And clients or individuals are going to deconstruct their negative beliefs and address some post-traumatic symptoms. And then finally, in the third stage, clients, individuals, or loved ones are going to move towards reconnection. And we're going to talk about what that could look like, not only from people recovering from addiction, but also people that could be recovering from trauma from other areas. So in reconnection, clients are going to, or loved ones will work, and their survivor is going to be getting back to their new normal. They're going to practice new habits, teachings, and begin to build a new fulfilling experience in their life. So this three-phase model is, again, something that's a diagram. It's not written in stone, but it's something that could be used when working with individuals that are going through recovery from trauma or addiction. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the window of tolerance. And Again, this is another really important thing. This webinar is all about informed care. So you're providing information for yourself so you know how to not only attune yourself when working with someone, but be able to have more information when you're working with them. If somebody's gone through trauma, you might have experienced and or, you know, their that you might have experienced, maybe they get really angry really quickly, or maybe you might experience that they shut down and it's almost like they've completely disappeared and you can't talk to them. The window of tolerance is a really good tool that you can use to describe the zone of arousal in which a person is able to function most effectively. And clients and or loved ones may be going in and out of their window of tolerance, and you might not even know it. So this tool will be able to give you just a little bit more tips to be able to work with that person. And then the next point is when people are within their zone, they're typically able to receive, process, and integrate information, otherwise respond to the demands of everyday life without much difficulty. And this optimal window was first named as such by Dan Siegel. So the window of tolerance, again, if somebody is calm, cool, and collected, they're able to respond to stress easily, they're able to make good decisions. And when somebody is outside of their window of tolerance, they may become really confused, they might become really angry, they might disassociate, which means that they'll zone completely out, and it might seem like they're not there. So how does the window of tolerance affect those with trauma? The first thing that we're going to talk about, when a person is within their window of tolerance, it's generally the case that the brain is functioning well and it can effectively process stimuli. That person is likely able to reflect and think rationally and make decisions calmly without feeling overwhelmed or withdrawn. And finally, during times of extreme stress, people experience periods of either hyper or hypoarousal. And we'll get to more of that in the next slide. So the states of window of tolerance. Hypoarousal, otherwise known as fight or flight response, is characterized by hypervigilance, feelings of anxiety or panic, and racing thoughts. And hypoarousal, known as the freeze response, may cause feelings of emotional numbness, emptiness, or paralysis. So when working with people, when working with a loved one, if you notice that they're going either into a fight or flight or a hypoarousal freeze response, the individual might not be able to process stimuli effectively. So it's important to note that if you notice this, it's not the person, it's what happened to them. And that's a really key thing to remember. You might feel like, oh, they're becoming really difficult, or oh my goodness, they're just not paying attention. That's not the case. Really making sure that when you have that information, you'll know that's not them. It's actually their response to a trauma, and they're likely to have been triggered by something that was around them. So in this state, the prefrontal cortex region of the brain will shut down. And this affects the ability to think rationally and often leads to the development of feelings of dysregulation, which may take the form of chaotic responses or overly rigid ones. In these periods, a person can be said to be outside of their window of tolerance. So to make this a little bit easier for everyone to either understand, I thought it would be really good to provide a visual point here. So if you look at this diagram, if you look over to the right, it'll say a normal range. So someone who is able to remain calm, cool, and collected will be able to stay within this normal range. Someone that has gone through a traumatic event will have a really hard time being able to navigate their life, and or they might go into anxiety or depression, depending. So the top part is a hypervigilant person, or and then the bottom part is hypoarousal. Now, it's also interesting to note and important to note that what a normal range would be for someone to remain in calm, cool, and collected. If somebody's gone through a traumatic event and or if they've gone into treatment, that normal range won't be as wide as you see there. It'll essentially go down and shrink. And so what could be something where if they were calm, cool, and collected, or if they have done some recovery work on them, the window will remain really slow. As someone works on their trauma and as someone who is in maybe treatment from recovery, this window of tolerance will gently open and open and open. That's what's known as post-traumatic growth. And it allows the person to not only expand their window of tolerance so they're not constantly being triggered by things, but it will also allow them to notice what their feelings are, notice if they're outside of their window of tolerance. But when somebody hasn't done any work on themselves or something is really, really traumatic and they're being triggered all the time, that's a really important thing to note, that it's not the person, it's something that they've gone through and their window of tolerance is very, very low. And you'll probably notice that if you've worked with individuals that have experienced traumatic experience or early on in their addiction recovery, this trauma response or this trigger can go off like a light switch. The first part, at the top part, where when you're working with clients, it's important to note that a client may have a lot of anxiety, they might panic, they might become hyperactive, have exaggerated responses, the inability to relax, be restless, hypervigilant, have digestive problems, have emotional flooding, chronic pain, sleeplessness, or experience hostility and rage. And then in the bottom part where somebody's in hypoarousal, a person may experience depression, a flat affect, which means their face is really quite blank, or the facial expressions, lethargy, deadness, exhaustion, chronic fatigue, disorientation, disconnection, disassociation, complex syndromes, pain, low blood pressure, or poor digestion. So I just wanted to switch over to Chelsea, who was going to give an example on one of her experiences when working with a client.
Yeah, so thanks, Alex. I'm actually going to discuss about the stuck on mode. So when they're in that hyperarousal zone, so that's the piece that's above the window. So when they're going out and they're going upwards. So my experience that I'm going to share was with a client, and he experienced and suffered from extreme bouts of anger. So growing up when he was young in his family system, there was a lot of physical, verbal, emotional abuse, and the client had really been living in a state of hypervigilance ever since he was a child. So at this point, his anger scared him. He came into my office one day and said, "I'm really nervous. I'm nervous for the weekend. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to act out." And he was just in the state of fear. And it broke my heart because it wasn't that he was an angry person that wanted to be angry and act like he was, strong and wanted to, create altercations with other clients, but he was actually in his fear and he did not know how to get out of being stuck on. So if you have an individual that, has gone through and suffered through a lot of traumatic experiences, when his nervous system was engaged, he just was, constantly hostile, emotional flooding, and he was in this state of fear. He said, honestly, Chelsea, all it takes is somebody looking at me the wrong way. And even if they're not trying to look at me the wrong way, I just don't know what to do. So that being said, in the supportive role, that's where, I invite him into the office, like Alex was saying before, and I was saying, creating that safety, where do you want to sit, and just start working with some tools, like how have you grounded yourself in the past, and, really just asking them how they're doing, empathize with their situation, normalize. That's a big, big thing. It's just normalizing. Wow, it's everything that you've been through. You're doing a great job. You're here. Really normalize, empathize with them, and just ask, in that collaborative approach of how can I best support you? The client is going to know what he needs more than you do. And if he doesn't, well, then we can explore together. So that's an example of a client, of someone that's been stuck on for a lot of their life. Back to you, Alex.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Chelsea. So I'm going to give an example of when a client has been in the stuck off mode. So when working with clients in a group setting, there's many times where this individual would seem like they have a lot of flat affect. They suffered from chronic fatigue. They had a lot of pain. They often were exhausted and they were disoriented. And they would constantly be apologizing for not being able to pay attention or apologize for seeming like they were not paying attention. And I really, really needed to, like Chelsea was saying, after the group, and it really breaks my heart sometimes when people feel like it's their fault. And like Chelsea was saying, normalize, validate, ask the client what they need in that moment. And this is where coming into informed care really can help. Giving a client, if they are open to it, just a little bit more information on some of these things, like the window of tolerance, which we talk about a lot in some of the groups that we do. Giving people a little bit more information so they know that, oh my goodness, it's not me. It isn't me. It's something that's a response. So a little bit of information that you can pass with clients or with a loved one, even when you recognize that someone perhaps is very disoriented, or they feel like they don't have any energy all the time, or they're going through that depression, letting them know that, I don't see you as a lazy person. I don't see you as someone who isn't paying attention. I see you someone that's really trying really hard, someone that really, from a strength-based perspective, is there. They're sitting there and they're doing their best. And that, little bit of validation, that little bit of encouragement, and giving them their choice to be able to learn more. I've seen, their eyes widen and they start to sit up a little bit better. And that's simply just having from an informed perspective, letting them know that, hey, you know what, we're here for you. We can help you. We've been there before. We don't think that this is someone that doesn't want to be here. Clearly, if you didn't want to be here, you wouldn't be here. So, we're here to help you. We're here to get through this together. So again, that's just another example. And I mean, I think Chelsea and I could probably use lots of different examples, but going through this webinar, I think it's really important from not only my lens of working as a healthcare professional, but someone who's actually gone through this before with my own addiction recovery and also trauma recovery from early childhood experiences. I think it's really important to be able to share that with people and let them know, like, it's not you. This is a symptom of undischarged traumatic stress, and we're here to help you through it. So the next portion that we're going to talk about, I believe, is the polyvagal theory. So I just want to give this as a disclaimer. I wanted to put polyvagal theory into this webinar series as a very light introduction. We're going to watch a quick video after this, and there's a lot of information on polyvagal theory that we could provide. However, it's a very, very good way for you to understand what could be going on within a client that you're working with or a loved one. So polyvagal theory is a collection of evolutionary and neuroscientific and psychological claims pertaining to the role of the vagus nerve in emotional regulation, social connection, and fear response. And according to Stephen Porget, not only does the body remember a traumatic experience, but it can actually get stuck in the trauma response mode. So we talk about the window of tolerance and how someone could be stuck on or stuck off. That's actually remembered in the body. So even when the threat is gone, the body still perceives danger and its defenses stay engaged. And again, polyvagal theory, there's a lot of information. Stephen's going to post the information, as well as we're going to be able to post more information for you in the future. I highly recommend looking into this theory, as it really goes through how even though, like I said, the threat is gone, the body remembers everything that's going on with the body. So healing from trauma, it's important to note that not only like the experience might be gone, but you can be remembering it for quite some time after. And it's about noticing and giving your loved ones support if you notice that the response is in that stuck on or off mode, that you know what to do. So next up, we're going to watch a quick video, and it's about healing from trauma and also polyvagal theory. So Chelsea is just going to cue that up for us now.
Over half of us have a chronic disorder such as high blood pressure or autoimmune disease. Rates of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addiction are skyrocketing. Why? The roots of these issues and more can often be traced to trauma, adverse childhood experiences, chronic stress, and ultimately, nervous system dysregulation. Meet your autonomic nervous system. Let's call it ANS. ANS takes care of a lot of your automatic functions, like your heartbeat, digestion, and body temperature. ANS also manages your survival and stress response, working to keep you alive when your life is in danger. ANS functions as our built-in detection system, constantly scanning our environment for cues of safety and cues of danger. As ANS scans the environment, it has three general responses or states. Safe. You feel calm, relaxed, and connected to those around you. Mobilized. When ANS detects danger, it sends a command and your heart rate and breathing increase. Adrenaline and cortisol are released, and blood rushes to your muscles so you can handle the threat. This is our fight-flight response. Immobilized. When ANS detects that the danger is so great that you can't fight or run, it shuts you down. In this state, our heart rate, blood pressure, and body temperature decrease, and pain-numbing endorphins are released. ANS does all of this automatically without us thinking about it. ANS doesn't just use these states for survival. It uses them to navigate through the world each day. When ANS functions well, it moves fluidly from one state to another, 1 minute mobilized and ready for action, and the next resting and recovering. ANS will often blend states together. When we play, ANS combines the mobilized and safe states. And when we are intimate with loved ones, it combines immobilized and safe states. When ANS can stay flexible and fluid like this, it helps us manage and become resilient to stress and negative events. We're able to bounce back and move on. Unfortunately, when we experience trauma and chronic stress, it can keep ANS from functioning in a healthy, regulated, and resilient way, and can keep us stuck in states of survival. A friendly get-together can become frightening. A simple meeting at work can become threatening. For those with a history of trauma and chronic stress, the ANS detection system often becomes faulty, constantly signaling danger even when we are safe. It's like ANS is an alarm system, constantly signaling fire even when there's no smoke and no flames. Consistently living in these survival states can be debilitating, and we often develop adaptive strategies like using drugs, alcohol, food, work, or sex in an attempt to bring regulation and temporary relief. Understanding how trauma impacts us is critically important. There is a whole spectrum of experiences that can be traumatizing and adversely impact ANS, like accidents, assaults, and natural disasters, which are often called shock traumas. There is also developmental or relational trauma, when we experience chronic adversity, abuse, neglect, and lack of safety while growing up. Many other experiences can be traumatizing, including chronic stress, medical procedures, and adverse community environments, like poverty, discrimination, and violence. Additionally, new research in epigenetics shows us that trauma can get passed down genetically at least 3 generations. In the past, we've thought about trauma as events that happen to us. We now know that trauma is an experience, not an event. It's what happens inside of us as a result of what happens to us. It's our response to the event rather than the event itself. Over 20 years ago, Kaiser and the CDC launched a groundbreaking study of over 17,000 patients that showed a direct link between adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and long-term health and wellness. In the study, 2/3 of participants reported at least one ACE. Over 20% reported 3 or more. When participants reported 4 or more ACEs, this corresponded to an increased chance for heart disease, cancer, drug abuse, and more. With 6 or more ACEs, life expectancy decreases by almost 20 years. We are learning that many physical and emotional symptoms may emerge from a chronically dysregulated ANS. When ANS gets stuck in survival states, our biology shifts its focus from the tasks that keep us healthy, happy, and thriving to surviving the immediate perceived threat. Many conditions and symptoms that are chronic and difficult to diagnose and treat can be attributed to a dysfunctional ANS. Our childhood experiences can also keep us from connecting with others. This is vitally important because as children, our number one survival priority is to attach to caregivers. When the people responsible for our safety aren't safe, and we are living in chronic states of unsafety, ANS doesn't get wired right. The part of ANS that judges what is safe and what is not becomes faulty. If intimacy and connection were unsafe as a child, as adults, we'll often unconsciously reject attempts from friends and partners to connect. Even though intimacy and connection is what we want, ANS feels it's unsafe and won't allow it. Trauma compromises our ability to engage with others, replacing the need for connection with the need for protection. When there has been trauma, ANS can no longer differentiate between our unsafe past and our now safe present. ANS can't turn off the need to protect, even though we are now safe. So what can we do when ANS becomes dysregulated? How do we recover from trauma and develop a healthy, regulated, resilient nervous system? Fortunately, we can retrain ANS to feel safe again. This is best done with the help of others. Each one of us has an ANS, and our ANS is constantly communicating with and attuning to the states of others. We autonomically mirror the states of those around us. This is called co-regulating. We see it in herd behavior. If one animal senses danger, the entire group becomes more alert, increasing their chances of survival. We're exactly the same. When we're with others who are stressed, angry, or depressed, it makes us feel worse. When we're with others who are calm and happy, it makes us feel better. Connecting with others who are safe, attuned, and present is the best way to restore a healthy ANS. For those struggling to recover from the impacts of trauma, there is an emerging field of innovative clinical therapies that have been developed to reestablish safety and regulation to ANS. We're also learning that many of the activities we intuitively know make us feel better, like spending time in nature, practicing yoga, dancing, helping others, and more, can help ANS become more regulated and resilient. Healing from trauma and finding release from being stuck living in survival states comes as ANS becomes regulated, increases its capacity for resilience, and regains its flexibility. It's not about being calm all the time or mobilized all the time. It's about having a flexible and resilient nervous system that can accurately assess safety and danger and responds appropriately. We're truly resilient when we can fluidly move from one state to another. For those living with the impacts of trauma and chronic stress, becoming unstuck is like beginning a new life. For the rest of us, understanding how our nervous system states guide our behavior can help us become happier, healthier, and more empathetic human beings. Collectively, we have an epidemic of social issues that are rooted in trauma. If we can do the work to heal past traumas and build healthy, regulated nervous systems as individuals, families, and communities, we can end the cycles that continue to reinforce our greatest challenges and create a safer, vibrant, and more connected world.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much, Chelsea, for queuing that video up. So I personally believe that anyone can heal from the traumas that they've gone through, and anyone can be in a supportive, caring role when working with someone, and an informed care working with someone that's experienced an event or an experience through trauma. What I'd like to talk about now is utilizing the three-phase model and how a client that's going through treatment within addiction recovery could go through the three-phase model and talk about what they could be doing in each phase. Now, the whole idea around going through the three-phase model and a client-centered approach for addiction recovery is to help a client and or a loved one go into post-traumatic growth. So in the video, it talked about co-regulation and it talked about how somebody could become unstuck. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that could look like for a client. And so the first stage that we're going to talk about is stage one, and that's safety and stabilization. So we went through this theory before, and we've gotten a lot more information now. We've gotten a lot more on things on how we could support someone. And now this next stage is going to be talking about what can people actually do. And I'd like to put a disclaimer out there that this is something that's sort of evidence-based and observed from working with thousands of clients personally, and also a unique lens for myself to qualify and to say that I've gone through this process myself, not only with addiction recovery, but also from healing from early childhood traumas. So as the video talked about people learning how to thrive and becoming unstuck, this personally is something that I'm passionate about and something that I have gone through in my life. I've witnessed it with other clients and individuals before and loved ones. So there is recovery that is possible, and through treatment, not only within Together We Can, but through other organizations, somebody has the chance to go into post-traumatic growth. So in stage one, what could someone do? So they're working towards safety and stabilization. So at Together We Can, this involves safety in a space. If a person's at home, it could mean creating a routine in the morning, afternoon, and the evening. They could be going to support groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, etc. Working on self-care discovery. So in stage one, it's all about creating, a personal time for themselves, creating those new habits, eating to regulate the body, digestion, emotion. Learning how to connect with those emotions. Many of the people that I work with on a regular basis, it might be an ongoing thing where people say, oh my goodness, why do we have to talk about our feelings so much? Well, in stage one, and when somebody is learning how to stabilize, it's important to be able to connect with themselves, really learn how to collaborate, learn how to talk about what's going on for them. And by doing this, they're going to be able to build self-esteem. They're going to be able to celebrate the consistency in their routine. In treatment, many of the places that clients will go to, including Together We Can, there's a structure. That structure is in place for a reason. It's creating stabilization for a person that's healing from addiction recovery. This could also include increasing some connections with friends, going to talk on Zoom calls. We're in a pandemic now. Electronics are our friends. So creating video spaces for the clients that we're working with. At the center that I work at, our clients have access to a tablet or the ability to call loved ones and see them face to face. They're going to begin to manage their symptoms, and that's simply because they're going to be able to talk about the things that are going on, and they're going to learn how to advocate for themselves and realize that it's safe to do so. So in the next stage, in stage two, a client could be, or a loved one could begin to process their trauma. Now, again, I want to put a disclaimer in terms of trauma as a trauma. I'm not a trauma therapist, but I am someone who has worked with many clients through addiction recovery, and the beginning process of their trauma processing, they'll start to understand the deeper impact of trauma. This could be through psychoeducation. It could be working with a counselor. It could be in groups. If they're going to a 12-step fellowship, this could be step work, a mentor, a coach, and or a trauma specialist. Clients are going to be given the time to have time for grief and mourning. They're going to process this with a counselor, maybe write letters. They're going to create new actions in their life or talk about this in process groups. They're going to really start to explore and try and deconstruct the negative beliefs or address their post-traumatic symptoms. And this is going to be done through assessments with a counselor, their own internal process, and also they're going to follow through when they are in safety. And then finally, in stage 3, pardon me, this is going to be reconnection. So within addiction recovery specific lens through treatment, Together We Can, there are second stage homes to be able to provide safety and stabilization and routine. They're going to have peer support. They're going to be around a continuum of care that's going to give them access to be able to really be in touch with talking with people, support networks, within the community. So they're really reintegrating and finding their voice, choice, empowerment within the communities. They're going to try and get back to their new normal, and that's by practicing new habits, teachings, and they begin to find a new fulfilling experience. They're going to continue their routine and continue to advocate for themselves. So again, this is all something that's all within the realm of recovery. It could be something that somebody could do. It's not, everything is not set in stone. Now, by going through the 3-phase model, what we want to do is to be able to promote and help our clients, help our loved one to go to post-traumatic growth. And this involves 5 domains. So when working with people and they're going in phase 3, or they're really starting to process a lot of the things they're going through, you're going to start to see that a person's strength is going to improve. Their ability to handle changes, discovering that they're stronger than they thought they were, and have an increased sense of strength and thriving in relationships. They're going to become closer with their relationships. They're going to be more open to count on people in times of trouble, trusting, greater sense of closeness. Greater appreciation for life. They're going to have changed their sense of priorities. They're going to have a greater appreciation for their own life. They're going to be starting to own their decisions and build their confidence, become present or more mindful. New possibilities. Clients or loved ones will have the willingness to explore new possibilities and be likely to change things as they need changing. Now, we talked about the window of tolerance. By this time, when they're going through post-traumatic growth and they're starting to really feel connected in the world, they're starting to increase their window of tolerance. And the reason why they have the ability to change things that need changing and a willingness is because they have started to heal. Their window of tolerance is opening. Their ability to remain calm, cool, and collected is increased. Their ability to be able to notice where their emotions are there. They're going to be having that empowerment in their choice. So they're really going to start to, you're going to see a lot of growth that will happen during this time. And then finally, spiritual development. Life is experienced at a deeper level, development of a personal sense of spirituality, and life's beliefs and philosophies will become fully developed for that person. And another thing to note, the signs of post-traumatic growth are really important. Chelsea's going to be talking a little bit in the next about how you would be able to support someone, but I just want to put a shout out there. When you see people that are going through these post-traumatic growth times in their
Alex?
So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chelsea, and she's going to talk a little bit more about what you could do as a supporting role.
Great, thank you. Okay, so utilizing the 3-phase model, like Alex just said, in the supporting role. So what can you do as somebody that's supporting somebody else, whether it's a loved one, a client, or a patient? So we're going to look at stage 1, safety and stabilization. It's really important in the supporter role to provide that consistency. So like I said before, we mentioned, offering that space in your office. Where do you want to sit? Do you want the door open? Do you want the door closed? Another thing that's important there is tonality. How are you approaching this client? Do they prefer that you speak, with a calmer voice? Really being able to read their energy and again, ask what allows them to feel safe. Be informed and knowledgeable. So get as much information as you can. And I want to thank you all for being here because that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're learning about trauma-informed care, and that's the first step. It's really important. Attend an AA meeting with the individual. If this person is recently stepping into this exploration of their traumas, especially if, they are in a treatment setting for the first time and they're struggling with substance misuse. It can be a scary thing for them to go to an AA meeting on their own. As Alex said, it's a lot different right now, unfortunately. The in-person meetings, especially within our organization outside of the center, the clients are unable to go, but we do offer them, like Alex was saying, tablets. They can join into meetings, AA meetings all over the world. I have some clients that were doing some in Australia a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, when it comes back to the more new normal of being able to go in person, that can be very helpful to go along with them. Attend the TWC Family Education Program. So I'll do a little plug here. I was helping out Stephen for a little bit with this. So we have a family education program that's offered through TWC. You don't actually have to have a loved one or an employee or whatever it may be, or whoever it may be inside the organization. So anybody can actually join. It runs for 4 weeks straight, and it's just one night a week. The first session is 3 hours because they show a video. It's a little bit longer, but then it's 2 hours for consecutively for 4 weeks. That being said, they talk about the science behind addiction. They talk about boundary setting. There's tons and tons of information that's given that can be helpful for you as someone that's supporting somebody that is struggling with substance misuse. So Stephen will probably put a link maybe up on the Facebook page for more information on that if you would like to join. Be aware of your personal responses. Okay, this is a big one. So if you are with someone and you are supporting them while they're going through, trauma exploration, or someone that is in treatment and they're new to sharing their experience, maybe disclosing information they haven't disclosed before, be very aware and cognizant of your face. So if someone's going to share something, try not to do the or like this horrified look, try and remain neutral and grounded. That can definitely take practice, and it depends in what area you're helping this person out. Don't take an individual's response personally. Like Alex was saying before, it's not the person, it's the trauma. Regulate your emotions and practice personal self-care. 100% make sure that you're in a place where you're able to stay regulated, where you have coping mechanisms to stay within your window of tolerance. And most importantly, in a supporter role, you really need to practice personal self-care. If you don't know what that looks like, start exploring that for yourself. If you work for an organization, you work in a mental health setting, really take that time when you're away from work to go outside, be in nature, play cards with your friends, whatever it may be, to really be able to give yourself time, because if you're not caring for yourself, it's pretty much impossible to care for somebody else. So be aware of that self-care component. That's another thing that's really touched upon in the family education group as well. Use trauma-informed language. So we'll explain in a minute, so I won't get into that. We've got another slide on that. So going into stage 2, this is when a client or a loved one would be in the trauma processing. So allow the person space to begin addressing the deeper impact of the trauma. So again, this is a time for grief and mourning. There can be a lot of emotions here. And it's not that, someone discloses and then all of a sudden they become emotional. Grief needs to be interlaced throughout our lives, right? Remember how I spoke about those traumaversaries. Grief can come and go, just like different triggers can trigger somebody from a past trauma. Manage your personal response when they deconstruct negative beliefs and address the post-traumatic symptoms, and continue to provide safety. And lastly, in stage 3, this is the reconnection. So once the trauma work is done, the survivor gets back to their new normal. One thing that I do have to note here, sometimes the trauma work is never done. There might be the initial disclosure, which could be more rough or more emotional than it would be if you go to talk about it, say 6 months or a few years down the road. But that being said, trauma work being done, there's always going to be triggers, right? And we talk about those trauma anniversaries. So just be aware that, the client will learn some coping mechanisms, but it could still pop up and they might need your support with that. Support them in their new routines. So looking at trauma with the lens of addiction, say within treatment, they're going to have new routines when they leave. I know I mentioned earlier, a lot of clients struggle when they first come in and they think about, I can't go back to that workplace I was at before. It's definitely toxic to my recovery. Maybe they were using on the job, or maybe they were using while they were working at that place, which could be a trigger for them. So really support them in their new routines, continue the stability, Practice new habits, teachings, and begin to build new fulfilling experiences with the individual you are supporting. So really celebrate, when it comes to addiction and substance misuse, really celebrate what they've gone through, where they've come from. My apologies. Encourage their new connections. Connections are going to be a big piece too. So in the treatment setting, whether they're processing traumas, they're learning new coping mechanisms, they're going to have a lot of beautiful connections. I mean, we hope that they have a lot of connections. The bonds that I see formed within these rooms is unbelievable. It is such a special place to be. So really encourage those friendships and those relationships, whether it's with a sponsor or a sober coach or peers that they've met while they've been in treatment. And lastly, have them share their post-traumatic growth success. So ask them about their success, celebrate this with them. I think it's really important. And I know for a lot of clients that can be a little scary at first, standing up in front of a group. It's part of the 12 steps in AA and NA is giving back and sharing the message. So once they get to a place where they've, gone through the safety and stabilization, they've gone through the trauma processing, and they're able to really ground themselves and stay in that window of tolerance, the hope is that they can share with other people, so other people can find some optimism and some hope, in moving forwards. Okay, and I think this is lastly, supporting someone. So additional tips that we wanted to go through. So perspective, be aware when the past is intruding into the present. Don't take responsibility for what isn't yours. And obviously, if you can do this in a gentle manner. Predictability, not everyone loves surprises, especially trauma survivors. They often prefer predictability. It promotes a feeling of safety. I spoke of that, whether it's the environment, your tone, how you address them. Space, allow time for a survivor to calm down and take perspective. So trauma survivors often have difficulty regulating emotions and take longer to calm down, as we talked about with that diagram of the window of tolerance. Recalibration. So try and rid your vocabulary, if you can, of oversensitive or over emotional or over anything really. It can really invalidate a person's experience. I don't know if you've ever been told that before, you're overly angry or you're overly sensitive. It can really allow the other person that you're trying to support to just shut down and think, what, I'm not even going to share, or I'm not even going to talk about my emotions because I'm too much for this other person. So in that supportive role, we really want to be grounded, take a step back and let them explore those emotions. Choice. A survivor can be triggered if they are denied choice and control. So confer, collaborate, and cooperate. Have a discussion about it. Have a discussion about where they're at in their process of exploring these traumas that they're going through, or if they're in the treatment setting for addiction. And lastly, support. Be kind, loving, and patient, but empathetically set limits. You have needs too. And so something that comes into play there are boundaries, right? Depending on who the person is or what the setting is, it's really important to know your boundaries. And that's also where self-care can come in as well. If we can't support ourselves, it's very difficult to support others, especially when we're talking about trauma with the lens of addiction, a lot of emotions there. So yeah, I think, we've got using trauma-informed language. I think this is the last slide, and I'm going to send it back over to Alex.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Chelsea. So going back into what Chelsea was talking about, recalibration, I think it's really important to end on this note when we talk about the language that we use when we're working with individuals that have had an experience, recalibrating how we are talking with them and using a more strength-based or trauma-informed language. The first one that we're going to talk about in terms of deficit-based language is using the word addict and alcoholic. So when using language, when working with the clients that you're working for or with our loved one, many people within the recovery community will use the word addict and alcoholic. And it's important to go back to the guiding principles and to talk about that safety and the choice and the empowerment, asking someone how they would like to have this word used. Some people in recovery will use a person in recovery. Some people will say addict or alcoholic. And so again, empowerment and choice, letting people know that if you're using the word addict, it's not because you are using it in a stigmatized way or to create shame. It's about reclaiming that word back. So just being mindful of that empowerment and choice. If somebody's saying, my name is so-and-so and I'm an addict and I've reclaimed that name because I today have no shame and I really, really believe that this is something where I can take the power back, then you know what? Honor that within themselves. Let them have that choice. If they are not someone who's like, if they say, you know what, using that word addict really brings up a lot of shame and makes me cringe, don't use that word. Like, listen to the people that you're working with or the loved one. So the next one that we'll want to talk about is frequent flyer. Next is unfit parent, resistant, drug abuse or clean, hostile, aggressive, helpless, or lazy. So these are just some of the deficit-based language. And again, this is going back to the people that we're working with and or your loved one could have a lot of shame, a lot of, internalized beliefs about themselves that could be really, really harming themselves. So if we're reinforcing this language, we're saying, oh, you're such a frequent flyer, or, oh, that person's an unfit parent, especially when you're talking around. There's many people that could be around talking with them, or if they're hearing you say, oh, you're being resistant, then, it's going to really reconfirm that belief within themselves. So we want to use more strength-based trauma-informed words. So instead of addict or alcoholic, if they're choosing for you to use a different word, you could say person with substance use. Instead of frequent flyer, we could use utilizing services and supports. Instead of saying unfit parent, try using person experiencing barriers to parenting. Instead of using resistant, try using chooses not to, isn't ready for, or not open to. Instead of use drug abuse or clean, say drug misuse. And again, all of these things is like giving a client the power and the empowerment back to really listen to them. If they were saying, please don't use the word clean around me or drug abuse, then use something else. Instead of using hostile or aggressive, try using protective response. Instead of using helpless, try using unaware of capabilities. Instead of saying lazy, try using ambivalent or working towards hope. And again, these are all strength-based phrases that you can use when working with people that are going through either addiction recovery, going through treatment, they're processing their own traumas. It's really, again, helping them also use language that's going to be positive for their own life. And so when they themselves start talking about themselves, they're going to say, oh my gosh, I'm such an unfit parent. I never show up for my kids. They'll start saying, oh my goodness, I didn't know that I had barriers to parenting. I didn't know. So it's really starting to open up their eyes. If they've always heard you're hostile, you're aggressive your whole life, you could try using different responses by saying, hey, I hear you. How about let's, work together, and what's something else we could say about ourselves, and say, oh, you're using a protective response, and letting them know, saying, I see you, and it's not necessarily something that, I'm holding against you. It's something that I'm using to help you move along on your journey. So again, it's such an amazing thing to be able to personally see people recover from addiction, recover from trauma, and being able to walk the path with them and have the experience with them. I feel really blessed and very grateful to be able to, kind of do a full circle in my own life, and also be able to be sort of a light for other people. So I feel very blessed and very grateful to be able to give some more insight through this webinar. And, I want to say thank you so much to Stephen Hall for putting this webinar on, and for asking myself to be part of it. So again, thank you so much. And back over to Chelsea.
Hi, yeah. One last thing that I wanted to say, as far as using this trauma-informed language, if you're having these awarenesses and these ahas, I think that's fantastic. But another thing is I don't want you to be hard on yourself. So if you're trying to incorporate this language into either your practice or your everyday life, don't kick yourself if you mess up, right? Again, like Alex was saying, it really depends on the client or the loved one as well. But yeah, I open the door for you to maybe change some of your language if you can. And again, I am super grateful to be here. This was a wonderful experience. I hope that you all are able to take something from this, and we will send it back over to Stephen. We do actually have a list of resources that he can post to the Facebook page, or at least give you guys a link to everything from the rape crisis line, helpline for children, kids phone, Veterans Affairs, Victim Link BC, and Women Against Violence Against Women Rape Crisis Center as well. And of course, 911. So yeah, thank you very much. Stephen, if you're there.
I am. Thank you so much, Alex and Chelsea. That was so informative. We had a lot of great feedback as well in the Q&A section. A lot of people emailing and just thanking you guys so much for the presentation that you've done today and the learning that everybody has undertaken as a result of that. And I just want to say as well, I know that the residents of Together We Can that are working with both Chelsea and Alex, they have nothing but positive things to say about the groups and the one-on-one counseling that they receive from both of these individuals, as well as the rest of our staff. So thank you for your hard work and commitment. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. It was great to have such a huge audience. I've been messaging in the chat there as well as on the Q&A. I don't see any open questions that we have right now. We are getting a lot of thank yous, so thank you for joining us and you're welcome. So what I would suggest is I have put my email out there several times. If there is any questions that you have that come up, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our phone number is 604-451-9854, and our website is twcrecoverylife.org. I will throw my information into the chat there again for everybody, and I've commented on the Facebook live feed as well. So with that, we're going to leave it where it's at, but we do hope that maybe you'll, stay connected to Together We Can. We do plan on doing a bunch of these community webinars. So please feel free to like our Facebook page and Instagram page at TWC Recovery Life. Visit our website, twcrecoverylife.org, and you can always email us at info@twcrecoverylife.org as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of the week. Thanks, Alex and Chelsea.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for hosting.
Thank you so much again.